Thanks, Ajay. I appreciate the one applause. So on Ajay's recommendation, I'm taking this a different approach. This isn't really a presentation about Kepler, but I really want to bring to the audience an understanding of how space access as we know it has been changing. So, when we think about the space industry at large, every single day today, a new space venture is being formed. Outer space companies, people launching stuff into orbit.
Mina, sorry, Mina, I'm just going to interrupt you for one sec, just to help put this in perspective for those who haven't met you. If you can just give 30 seconds on the business and your launch in January, so then they can understand the context of this.
For sure. So 30 seconds on Kepler. We design and build really small satellites that will form a global telecommunication network, powering hundreds of millions of IoT devices for OEMs that want to distribute product globally. So they embed an equivalent of a Kepler SIM card in their OEM product, and then they can use it for two-way communications with that product anywhere across the world using a single network globally, where otherwise they would have to deal with many different frequency bands and many different carriers around the world. The vision for Kepler long-term is for the establishment of a connectivity solution in space to power future human space travel and Mars habitation.
And earlier this year, your launch?
January 19th. I will get to it in the presentation, so I don't want to take it away, but I will.
I'll leave it there.
Yeah.
It's all yours.
For sure. So this is really one of the most exciting times for the space industry. A few years ago, we couldn't imagine the idea of a privately held space enterprise. Yet today, and I'm not going to take Ajay's thunder away, there will be announcements of a CDL space stream.
Last year, took it. You did. That's it. You just took it.
Now we know.
Touche. All right, we both stole each other's thunder. Go ahead.
To be fair, it did leak on Tech Vibes before I said anything. And last year alone, $4 billion of venture investment went into the space industry. A lot of this is centered around one really simple idea. It's the whole idea that space access as we know it has been completely redefined. And so access takes on many different definitions. Access is the physical ability to put something into orbit. Access is the technical know-how. Access is the supporting community. Access is the regulatory framework for us to be able to touch and use space. But we take access oftentimes for granted. You can go on your phone, get a Google search, and within seconds, access countless information. You can go on Wikipedia. We have access to open source software. But this type of unfettered access has never existed in the space industry before. The space industry largely lived as a paradigm of national governments, something between the Soviets and the Americans building an arms race to claim a world first, a matter of national pride, supported by hundreds of engineers, unlimited resources, to be able to put something into space. And that's how it had to happen. So in the 1950s, between the Explorer and Sputnik, which were the first two mentions of accessing space, backed by missiles that had been built for military regiment. And as we know it, and one of the things that I'm looking at is 50 years later, so in the year 2000, that access to space largely hadn't changed. It still took teams of hundreds. This is just one of the most recent satellites from an Iridium constellation. It takes teams of hundreds and centered around a model of infrastructure where it takes 3 to 5 years to design and 15 years to operate. So the state of the art of this infrastructure is 20 years old. That's the best telecom infrastructure operating in space today, and that's centered around how we built infrastructure in space. What I'm really excited to talk about is how I'm seeing firsthand in my experience building Kepler that space access has been fundamentally changing. At Kepler, over the course of 12 months, we went from a napkin, a paper idea on how we want to use space commercially for the betterment of our world. And 12 months later, with a team of 10 people, we put together a satellite. A satellite that is 1/100th the size and cost of your traditional communication spacecraft. So I brought one with me here today. This is it. It's a one-to-one model of the physical satellite we have. It's not a scaled-down model. It is the real thing. Weighs 5 kilograms, measures 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 30 centimeters. This is space access becoming redefined. And not only did we build it, But we got to start thinking about how do we touch space, how do we get physical access to space. And on January 19th of this year, I had a really incredible journey. So I touched down in China, in the heart of Zhoushan, which borders Mongolia. I don't know if you guys can see the red dot. So I went into Zhoushan looking at this missile held by the Chinese national government that was meant to take our first satellite up into orbit. Surrounded by 15 military personnel, we had a drone buzzing above head, watching everything that we were doing. The network was shut down from 4G to 2G. And I was sitting there anxiously hoping that this missile would get us up into orbit. And after a few of the most unnerving minutes of my life, this happened. We heard a roar ripping through the entire launch complex. And our first satellite was headed up into orbit. On board the Long March 11, which is the first time that a Canadian company has commercially used a Chinese launcher to get a satellite up into orbit. Thank you. But that just means we had a satellite on a rocket. That didn't mean the satellite worked. So 20 minutes later, which were literally the most unnerving 20 minutes of my life, sitting there anxiously to hear, did the satellite work? Did it make it safely into orbit? And so we got the first beacon up from the satellite saying, hey, it works, we're registered. And the best I could come up with to the team of 10 waiting back in Toronto was their fearless leader sending back this championed email that says, launch is officially successful. I was literally unable to type at that point in time. So, we're not alone in this endeavor. There are hundreds of satellites being launched. 300 satellites launched in 2017, 500 are scheduled for 2020. And this is a video of one of the most impressive launches that took place last year, putting out 104 satellites in a single rocket. I'm going to play it again because that went by really quickly. These are 104 satellites being launched into orbit by a company called Planet Labs. And every one of these satellites is actually generating meaningful value for us here on Earth. These satellites are providing the lifeblood of information that we get to take advantage of every day. But rather than talk to you about the specifics of weather collection or communications or imaging and how it benefits us, I thought I'd take a different approach and talk about what would we do in a day without satellites. If satellites didn't exist today, how would it work? So at 9 a.m. we wake up and nothing monumental happens. Airplanes don't fall out of the sky, water doesn't go out, lights don't go out, we still have our food resources intact, at least for now. What starts to be an outage of satellite is more of a nuisance. People don't have access to their satellite TV to watch their favorite breakfast television. But meanwhile, over the Atlantic, you have aircraft that are flying with thousands of passengers, watching movies completely oblivious to the fact that their pilots can no longer access their ground control. Their aircraft are starting to veer off course. And without satellite communications, we have people doing foreign aid in the Sahara, soldiers on the ground, and a variety of people that are doing fishing, Arctic activities, or shipping sea vessels that are completely isolated from the rest of the world. By about 12 p.m., we started to notice the global impact of losing our global positioning system, or GPS. With GPS providing the critical timestamp or providing the location stamp to almost every network, every computer network around the world, we started to notice that our networks are no longer operating as expected. And not only that, we've taken a dependency on satellites for weather forecasting. Weather balloons and ground-based measurements can only take us so far. Most of our forecasting comes from satellites. And without forecasting, we now have farmers that are unable to plan their crop yield. We no longer can have retailers predict what type of product to put on the shelf. And we start to notice that our agricultural fields and our food security becomes at risk. By about 6 p.m., we're starting to notice that networks are shutting down, power is going out in a number of different regions that are dependent on timestamps, food security becomes scarce, and national governments are being alerted of the state of emergency. This is the impact of satellites today. And fortunately, we don't have to worry about this version of the world. We're at such an exciting time for the space industry. Today, we're working towards a more globally connected world with more satellites launching every single day that are powering the information, the lifeblood that we're consuming. Between 2000 and 2012, only 110 small commercial satellites were launched. But between 2012 and 2020, 2,500 small commercial satellites will be launched. We're on our way to an exciting future where satellites are bringing back more data and becoming the lifeblood of our industry. So why are we at this inflection point? What's happened to enable us to build satellites so much more drastically? How has space access become redefined? And it's all centered on some very simple concepts. In the year 2000, someone decided to go out and say, let us build a standard physical size of satellite. Such a simple idea. We will have a satellite that measures 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters. It can grow and shrink in size. We'll call it a 1-unit CubeSat if it is a single unit. We'll call it a 2-unit if it's double in size, 3-unit if it's triple in size. That was it. But what happened was something so much more profound. Because as soon as you had the first essence of a standard in the satellite industry, people started to build towards a standard. We started to experience off-the-shelf solar panels, off-the-shelf batteries, things that had never existed before. And today, if you guys want to go shop online, you can head to the Amazon for satellite parts. The Amazon for satellite parts carries your needs between battery systems, solar panels, to allow you to assemble a satellite off the shelf. I am not affiliated with CubeSatShop.com, but if you want to let them know Kepler sent you, totally okay. And once you've physically assembled this technical knowledge, how do you get your satellite up into space? Of course, there exists the Uber of space travel. No longer is it a single satellite, single rocket, national government purchase. You can share rides with fellow space travelers, as we did with Kepler through the Chinese launch. Our satellite that occupies 5 kilograms of mass went on board a 500-kilogram mass going up into orbit. And sharing rides reduces cost of space access and physically enables net new users to get up into orbit. So recognizing all these trends that were happening in the space industry, in 2015 I set out to start building Kepler with a few friends. And I was infinitely aware of what was happening, would go out to talk to people 30 years my senior and let them know, I'm going to build communication satellites. We're going to do it faster, we're going to do it cheaper, and we're going to do it quicker than you've ever done before. So naturally, the skeptical looks that I received at the ripe old age of 25 made this guy look believable. I was out there selling the real deal. You could get into satellites for the cost of financing a software business. But at Kepler, that's exactly what we did. We took our proprietary technology, which was a radio and antenna pulled out of one of my co-founders' PhD work, that enabled us to access space. It enabled us to use the standard, these parts off the shelf, and assemble a satellite in a matter of 12 months. We took our proprietary technology, off-the-shelf solar panels, off-the-shelf batteries, put it together, in a matter of 12 months, put our spacecraft into orbit. But this is just the first of our network. What we're doing at Kepler is we're building a constellation of 140 satellites that will connect devices all around the world. Hundreds of millions of OEM devices ranging from rail cars to station wagons to hard hats and everything in between. And our customers today are signing up to put on devices on our network. Today we've secured contracts with large OEMs that are putting in upwards of 20 million devices on our network to enable what used to be an unconnected widget to now be a connected widget, and now they can recur revenue off of this traditional widget sale. With the long-term vision of Kepler ultimately being providing for connectivity in space habitation. As we grow and expand our network, we want to be one of the foundational infrastructures that enable a number of net new space economic activity. And we're not alone in our endeavor. Today, you have companies being built centered around asteroid mining, people that are going out to explore space to mine precious metals and resources out of space for space habitation, people building space hotels, turning space into a shared resource that allows for space tourism, And all of these foundational infrastructures are all working towards an ultimate goal of making the world a multiplanetary species, working towards inhabiting Mars. If I can leave you guys with one message here today, it's that we're on the cusp of something really exciting for space. Space access has been redefined, and we're seeing a new world of satellites and people and economic activity that has never existed before. Thank you.